wife disappeared 13 months ago. For most of that time, I believed somebody had taken her. I know how that sounds now. I know what the police are saying. I have seen the headlines and the photographs they released. I know they call her disappearance an escape instead of an abduction. But they were not there when I came home and found the house empty. They did not see her phone sitting on the kitchen counter with the screen still lit. They did not see her half-finished cup of tea beside the sink, or the clothes turning slowly inside the washing machine. They did not stand in our bedroom and smell her shampoo on the damp towel. They did not spend the night walking from room to room calling her name until their voice stopped sounding human. Her name was Nessa Corbin. At least that was her name when she was my wife. She was 29 years old, 5'4", with dark brown hair and a pale patch of skin beneath her right ear shaped like a thumbprint. She was pregnant when she disappeared. 21 weeks. Our son was supposed to be born in March. I arrived home at 6:42 on a Thursday evening. I remember the exact time because I had called Nessa 4 times during the drive and watched the clock each time the call went to voicemail. Her car was parked in the driveway. The front door was locked. Inside, nothing looked disturbed. Her coat was hanging beside mine. Her shoes were near the radiator. Her phone was charging on the counter. The only unusual thing was the pantry door. It was open. A ceramic jar we used to store flour had been placed on the floor. The lid was lying beside it. There was no flour inside. The police later told me Nessa had been hiding cash in the jar. Nearly $3,000. They said she had withdrawn it in small amounts over 8 months. $20 here, $50 there. Never enough for me to notice. They believed she took it when she left. I asked why a woman planning to abandon her husband would leave her phone, her car, and most of her clothes behind. Detective Keene said people leaving abusive homes sometimes abandon anything that could be tracked. That was the first time he used the word abusive. Not troubled. Not unhappy. Abusive. He looked around our kitchen as though he expected to find pieces of Nessa under the floorboards. The police searched the house that night. They searched it again 2 days later. They brought dogs into the garden and opened the septic tank. They went through the woods behind our property. They examined the drains, the crawl space, and the ashes inside the fire pit. One officer pushed a thin metal rod into the flower bed while I watched from the window. They were not searching for a living woman. They were looking for where I had buried her. Keene questioned me for 9 hours. He asked about the hole in the bedroom door. I explained that Nessa had locked herself inside during an argument. I kicked the door beside the handle because she would not answer me. I did not kick it open. The frame cracked, but the lock held. That distinction mattered to me. It did not seem to matter to him. He asked about a neighbor who heard screaming. He asked why Nessa had visited an emergency room twice in the previous year. He showed me photographs taken during those visits. A swollen cheek, a split lip, finger-shaped bruises around one wrist. I explained each one. She fell in the bathroom. She struck her face on a cabinet. I grabbed her wrist when she tried to leave during an argument because she was hysterical, and I was afraid she would drive. The detective stared at me for several seconds. Then he asked whether I had ever strangled her. I laughed. It was not because the question was funny. It was because it was obscene. I loved Nessa. I had spent 6 years taking care of her. I paid our bills. I cooked because she hated touching raw meat. I drove her to work when it snowed. I slept on a chair beside her hospital bed after she had her appendix removed. I knew which tea she drank when her stomach hurt. I knew she hated the texture of peaches but liked peach-flavored candy. I knew she scratched the skin beside her thumbnail whenever she lied. I knew her better than anyone. That was why I noticed when she began changing. She started coming home late. She kept her phone turned face down. She stopped wanting me to touch her. She said pregnancy made her tired, but I could tell there was more to it. I asked questions because husbands are supposed to notice when something is wrong. She called it interrogation. I checked her phone because she would not tell me the truth. She called it controlling. I followed her car once because she said she was going to her sister's house. But her sister told me she was not there. Nessa said I was stalking her. Words can make anything sound ugly. Detective Keene asked if Nessa had ever tried to leave before. I told him no. He opened a folder and showed me a temporary protective order she had requested 3 years earlier. I knew about it. It was a misunderstanding. She withdrew the request before it became permanent. The document said I had threatened to break her jaw. What I actually said was that she should stop speaking to me like she wanted her jaw broken. It was not a threat. It was a warning about how other men might react if she spoke to them that way. Keene did not understand the difference. By the second month, the police stopped treating Nessa as missing. They would not say why. Keene told me they had reason to believe she left voluntarily. I asked what reason. He said he could not discuss it. I called him every day for 2 weeks. Then he blocked my number. So I searched for her myself. I printed 6,000 posters. I taped them to lampposts, bathroom mirrors, bus shelters, and grocery store notice boards. I drove through 3 states. I visited shelters and hospitals. I joined online groups for missing people. At first, strangers helped me. They shared her photograph and sent messages saying they were praying for our family. Then somebody found the protective order. Another person found a court filing from when Nessa tried to divorce me. She withdrew that too. Nobody cared. They posted screenshots of the accusations without the outcomes. People called me a wife beater, a murderer. One person edited Nessa's photograph to make her look dead and sent it to me with the words, "You know where she is." I created new accounts after that, dozens of them. Every night I searched recent public photographs from towns within 500 miles. Restaurants, fundraisers, school events, church gatherings, marathons, property listings, anything where a face might appear in the background. I purchased facial recognition software from an encrypted forum and loaded every photograph of Nessa I owned into it. The program gave me more than 800 possible matches. Most were nothing. A woman standing behind a bride, a blurred passenger at a train station, a face reflected in a shop window. I followed every lead. Once I waited outside a dentist's office for 7 hours because a woman in the receptionist's Facebook photograph had Nessa's chin. She was 52 and married to a police officer. Another time, I drove through the night to a campground after a trail camera photographed someone with dark hair. The figure was a teenage boy. People say obsession changes the way you see things. They are right. Toward the end, I saw Nessa everywhere, in passing cars, at the far ends of supermarket aisles, standing behind me in windows. Sometimes I woke in the night convinced she was lying beside me, only to reach across the mattress and touch cold sheets. Then I found the marketplace photograph. It was 2:11 in the morning. I was searching furniture listings because people often photographed rooms without checking what appeared in mirrors or windows. The listing was for a wooden crib, handmade oak, $175, collection only. The seller lived in a town called Bellwether, 7 hours north of me. There were 6 photographs. The first showed the crib from the front. The second showed the carved rails. The third showed a small scratch near one leg. In the fourth photograph, the seller had stepped backward to capture the entire nursery. There was a round mirror on the opposite wall. A woman appeared in its reflection. Only part of her body was visible. She stood in the doorway behind the photographer, one hand gripping the frame. Her face was blurred by motion. Her hair was shorter. Her body was thinner. But beneath her right ear was a pale, thumb-shaped patch of skin. I enlarged the photograph until the pixels broke apart. I stared at that patch for nearly an hour. Then I vomited beside the desk. It was Nessa. I knew it with the same certainty that you know your own reflection. The seller's name was Bram Harlow. His profile picture showed a broad-shouldered man with reddish hair and a little boy sitting on his lap. The boy looked 5 or 6. Bram worked as a paramedic. He lived in Bellwether. His profile was private, but the marketplace listing included his address after I messaged him from a fake account. I told him my sister was expecting a baby, and I wanted to buy the crib as a surprise. He replied within 20 minutes. He seemed friendly. That made me hate him immediately. I asked if I could collect it Saturday afternoon. He said yes. I did not contact the police. That is the decision everyone keeps pointing to now. They say an innocent man would have called the authorities. An innocent man would have trusted the investigation. But the police had already decided I was guilty of something. If I told Keene, he would warn Bram. He would call Nessa and tell her to move. They would make her disappear again. I packed clothes, rope, a flashlight, bolt cutters, a folding knife, and the pistol I kept in the nightstand. The pistol was legal. I brought it for protection. Bellwether was smaller than I expected. The town sat between miles of dead farmland and dense pine forest. The roads were narrow and cracked. Most of the houses stood far from one another. Bram's property was near the edge of town. A gray 2-story house with a detached garage and a red metal roof. There was a tire swing in the front garden. A small bicycle leaned against the porch. I rented a room at a roadside motel 4 miles away and parked behind an abandoned feed store where the car could not be seen from the main road. From there, I walked through the forest until I reached the hill behind Bram's property. I brought binoculars. For 3 hours, nothing happened. Then the front door opened. The boy came out first. He wore a yellow raincoat and jumped from the porch steps into a puddle. Bram followed him. Then Nessa stepped outside. I stopped breathing. Her hair had been cut to her jaw. She wore a green sweater and jeans. There was a ring on her left hand. For several seconds, I could not understand what I was seeing. Nessa looked older, but not damaged, not imprisoned. She was smiling. The boy splashed mud onto her shoes. Nessa grabbed him and tickled him until he screamed with laughter. Bram wrapped one arm around her waist. She leaned into him. I squeezed the binoculars so hard the edges cut into my palms. Bram kissed the side of her head. Nessa turned and kissed his mouth. It was not quick. It was not forced. She put one hand against his chest and held herself there. My wife kissed another man while I watched from the trees. I stayed on the hill after they drove away. I do not remember walking back to the motel. I remember sitting on the floor of the shower with my clothes still on. The water ran cold over my head. I thought about the crib. Nessa was not pregnant anymore. The child should have been nearly 8 months old. But there was no baby in the house. Maybe Bram sold the crib after something happened. Maybe he had killed my son. That explanation was easier to accept than the truth my mind kept placing in front of me. That Nessa had left me. That she had built another family. That she had looked happier standing beside Bram than she had looked beside me in years. The next morning I followed them into town. Bram dropped the boy at a primary school. Then he continued to the hospital. Nessa stayed in the car. She drove to a small grocery store and went inside alone. I followed her. She moved through the aisles with a basket over one arm. I kept 2 rows behind her. She bought cereal, coffee, chicken broth, and a bag of small oranges. Ordinary things. That was the most painful part. I had imagined her suffering every day. I had imagined chains, locked rooms, and threats. Instead, she was comparing soup labels. She looked peaceful. At the pharmacy counter, the employee greeted her. "Morning, Livia." Nessa smiled. "Morning, Livia." That was what they called her now. I waited until she left. Outside, she placed the grocery bags in the back of her car. I said her name. "Nessa." She froze. A jar slipped from one bag and shattered on the asphalt. The smell of tomato sauce filled the air. She turned slowly. When she saw me, every bit of color vanished from her face. Her mouth opened. I took 1 step toward her. She backed into the car. "I found you," I said. She shook her head. "I knew you were alive. Don't." Her voice was barely audible. "I searched everywhere. Please don't come closer." "Did he hurt the baby?" She started crying. The reaction confirmed everything. I moved toward her. She screamed. Not my name, not for help. She simply screamed like an animal caught in machinery. People turned in the parking lot. Nessa ran. She left the groceries and sprinted across the road. A van sounded its horn and missed her by inches. I followed until 2 men stepped between us. One asked if she knew me. I said I was her husband. Nessa shouted from across the road. "He's going to kill me." The words stopped everyone. One man reached for his phone. I left before the police arrived. I returned to the woods behind Bram's house. At 3 in the afternoon, Nessa's car raced into the driveway. Bram arrived 10 minutes later in an ambulance supervisor vehicle. He pulled Nessa into his arms on the porch. She was shaking. He looked toward the tree line. I was far enough away that he could not see me. The boy did not come home from school. They must have sent him somewhere safe. As darkness fell, Bram walked around the property with a flashlight and a shotgun. He checked the garage, the garden, and the trees. At one point, he stood less than 40 yards from me. He shouted into the forest, "Heath Corbin." Hearing my name come from his mouth made my skin crawl. "If you're out there, the police are looking for you." I stayed still. "If you come near her again, I'll kill you." That was a threat, a real one. I could have reported him. Instead, I watched him return to my wife. When I reached the motel that night, an envelope had been pushed beneath the door. My name was written on the front. Inside was a letter. "Heath, I left because I was afraid you would kill me. I contacted the police after I got away. They knew I was safe. I begged them not to tell you where I was. The baby died before I left. You know why. My name is Livia Harlow now. Bram is my husband. The boy you saw is his son, Kit. I love them both. Do not come near us again. If there is anything human left inside you, let me live. The letter was signed Livia, not Nessa. The handwriting looked like hers, but people can be forced to write anything. Bram could have stood over her. He could have dictated every sentence. The mention of the baby was meant to hurt me. It worked. I did not sleep. I read the letter until the paper softened beneath my fingers. At dawn, I burned it in the motel sink. The police visited the motel at 9. I saw the cruiser before they reached the office and escaped through the bathroom window. I left my belongings behind and returned to the woods. Bram's house appeared empty. His truck was gone. Nessa's car was gone. They were running again. I waited until noon before approaching. The basement door had an ordinary pin lock. I opened it using a rake pick. People have made a lot of that detail. They call it a burglary kit. I owned tools. That does not make me a criminal. The basement was unfinished. A washing machine stood beside shelves of canned food. Children's snow boots rested near the stairs. There were no cells, no restraints, no signs Nessa had been held there. I went upstairs. The house smelled like coffee and the lavender soap Nessa used to buy. Her new life was everywhere. A mug on the counter said Livia. Her handwriting covered a whiteboard attached to the refrigerator. Buy Kit's lunch snacks. Call dentist. Bram night shift Thursday. A photograph showed Nessa, Bram, and the boy standing on a beach. The boy was missing one front tooth. Nessa had her arms around both of them. I removed the photograph from the refrigerator. Behind it was a drawing. 3 people holding hands. The boy had labeled them Dad, Kit, and Mom. Mom. My child was dead, and Nessa was letting another child call her mother. I tore the drawing in half. I searched every room. The crib from the listing was in a small nursery upstairs. The room had pale blue walls. There were boxes on the floor filled with baby clothes. For one stupid second, I thought Nessa was pregnant again. Then I found a photograph on the dresser. Bram was holding a newborn. The boy stood beside him. A blonde woman lay in a hospital bed. Bram's first wife. I found her obituary in a folder inside the closet. Her name was Coralie Harlow. She died from an aneurysm 2 months after giving birth. The baby in the photograph was Kit. The crib had belonged to him. Bram was not selling it because of my son. My son had never slept in it. I searched the main bedroom. Nessa's dresses hung beside Bram's uniforms. A bottle of perfume I had given her was on the dresser. She had taken it when she left. I picked it up and sprayed it onto the pillow. The smell nearly made my knees give way. Inside her nightstand were court documents. The first was a permanent protective order against me. The second confirmed her legal name change from Nessa Meyer Corbin to Livia Meyer Harlow. The third was a marriage certificate. She had married Bram 4 months earlier. There were printed messages attached to the protective order. My messages. Come home now. I know you're lying. You don't get to walk away from me. If you take my son, I will cut you open and take him back myself. I remembered writing the last one. It was not meant literally. I was drunk. Nessa had locked herself in the bathroom and threatened to call the police. I had been trying to shock her into listening. The court file included photographs. Some were familiar. The bruised wrist, the swollen face. Others were worse. One showed Nessa's back. Purple bruising covered her ribs and spine. There were small circular burns near her shoulder. I stared at them for a long time. The burns came from a cigarette. I remembered that night differently. We had been drinking on the porch. Nessa laughed when I told her I knew she was sleeping with someone. She said I was sick. She turned her back on me. I pressed the cigarette against her shoulder because I wanted her to stop laughing. Only once. The other marks must have come from ash. Another photograph showed her neck. Dark fingerprints wrapped around the skin beneath her jaw. The memory returned in pieces. Nessa standing by the sink. Nessa saying she hated me. My hand around her throat. Her feet scraping against the kitchen floor. Her face darkening. I let go before she lost consciousness. That matters. The file also contained a medical report. Nessa had been admitted to the hospital 8 days before she disappeared. She was 20 weeks pregnant. The baby had no heartbeat. The cause was placental abruption following blunt force trauma to the abdomen. My vision blurred while I read. I remembered the argument. She told me the baby was not mine. She said the father was someone from the accounting office where she worked. She had been planning to leave me before she discovered the pregnancy. I asked who he was. She refused to tell me. I pushed her against the refrigerator. She slapped me. I punched her in the stomach. Once. She bent over. I hit her again. She fell beside the kitchen table. I remember grabbing her hair and asking who the father was. I remember her making a sound through her teeth. I remember blood appearing between her legs. At the hospital, she told the doctor she fell down the basement stairs. I sat beside her while they told us the baby was dead. I held her hand. She did not look at me. For months afterward, I remembered the miscarriage as something that happened to us. A tragedy. Something cruel and random. Reading the report forced the memory into its proper shape. I killed the baby. A vehicle entered the driveway. I looked through the bedroom window. Bram's truck. He had come alone. I could have hidden. I could have left through the back. Instead, I waited in the bedroom. I wanted him to explain. Bram entered the house. He saw the torn drawing on the kitchen floor. I heard him call Nessa's new name. Livia? He climbed the stairs. When he entered the bedroom, I was holding the hospital report. He stopped. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he reached slowly toward the phone clipped to his belt. I pointed the pistol at him. Don't. His hand stopped. Where is she? She's safe. With who? The police. You told her to lie. Bram looked at the documents in my hand. You read those? She fell. He stared at me. She fell? The baby was not mine. You beat a pregnant woman until her baby died. She lied to me. Bram's face changed. His eyes moved from the pistol to the doorway. I knew he was calculating the distance. You need help, he said. I need my wife. She isn't your wife. We are still legally married. You were divorced in absentia 9 months ago. That isn't possible. You refused to respond to the papers. I never received them. You tore them up in front of the process server. I remembered a man visiting the house. I remembered throwing the envelope into the fireplace. You stole her. Bram took 1 step toward me. I raised the pistol. He stopped. She came to the hospital the night she lost the baby, he said. That was where I met her. You were sleeping with her. I was on the ambulance crew. You knew she was married. She could barely speak. Her throat was bruised. Her face was covered in blood. She said she fell. She told me the truth when you left the room. I could hear my heartbeat. Bram continued. She begged me not to call the police because she thought you would kill her before they arrived. That is not true. She tried to leave the hospital with me that night. No. But you came back early. No. You dragged her out by the arm. I remembered finding Nessa speaking to a red-haired paramedic in the hallway. I remembered grabbing her coat. I remembered Bram watching us leave. You were waiting for her, I said. I gave her a phone number for a shelter. You planned it. She called 3 days later. You stole my wife. I helped her escape you. I shot him. I do not remember deciding. 1 second he was speaking. The next, the pistol moved in my hand, and the room snapped with sound. The bullet struck Bram beneath the collarbone. He fell backward into the hallway wall. Blood sprayed across the pale wallpaper. He looked down at his chest as if someone had spilled something on him. Then he rushed me. He hit me hard enough to drive us both into the dresser. The pistol fell. We struggled on the floor. Bram punched me in the mouth. His blood smeared across my face. I reached for the folding knife in my pocket. He grabbed my wrist. We rolled into the hallway. He was stronger than me, but he was losing blood quickly. It poured from his chest and soaked the front of his shirt. I opened the knife against his palm. The blade cut through his hand. He screamed. I pulled free and stabbed him in the side. The knife went between his ribs with almost no resistance. That surprised me. I had expected bone. He punched me again. I stabbed him a second time, then a third. The blade struck something hard. Bram gasped and fell against me. His weight pinned my legs. I pushed him away. He crawled toward the stairs. Blood streamed behind him in a thick line. He made it to the top step before his arms failed. I grabbed his ankle. He kicked at me with the other leg. I drove the knife into the back of his thigh. Bram screamed Nessa's new name. Livia. I dragged him away from the stairs. He twisted onto his back. There was blood in his beard. You'll never find her, he whispered. I stabbed him in the throat. The knife entered beneath his jaw. His eyes widened. When I pulled it free, blood erupted over my hand and forearm. Bram clamped both hands against the wound. It came through his fingers in pulses. He tried to breathe. Each breath made a bubbling, sucking noise. I watched him for several seconds. I could have called an ambulance. He was a paramedic. He might have known how to keep himself alive. Instead, I asked where Nessa was. Bram stared at me. His mouth opened. Blood ran over his teeth. He made a sound that might have been laughter. I pressed my thumb into the bullet wound beneath his collarbone. His body arched. Where is she? He reached toward my face. His fingers touched my cheek. Then his hand fell. I checked his pulse. I found nothing. The house became quiet. I washed my hands in the upstairs bathroom. Blood had entered the grooves beneath my fingernails. I scrubbed until my skin split. While I was washing, I heard a sound downstairs, a door opening. I took the pistol and went down. The boy stood in the kitchen. Kit. He wore his school uniform and a blue backpack. A woman stood behind him. She was elderly, probably Bram's mother. She saw the blood on me. Then she saw the knife. Her mouth opened. I shot her before she could scream. The bullet struck her face. The side of her head opened against the kitchen cabinet. Fragments of bone and teeth struck the refrigerator. She collapsed beside Kit. The boy did not move. A high whine came from his throat. He stared at the woman's body. Half her face was gone. One eye hung against her cheek. I stepped toward him. Kit wet himself. The dark stain spread down the front of his trousers. "Where is Nessa?" He shook his head. "Where is Livia?" "At the police." "Which station?" He started crying. I grabbed his backpack strap and pulled him toward me. "Which station?" "I don't know." "Did she say where she was going?" He shook his head again. I saw Bram's phone on the kitchen counter. I picked it up. It required a code. I held the phone in front of Kit. "What is the number?" He continued crying. I slapped him. The force turned his head. A red mark appeared across his cheek. "What is the number?" 6281. The phone unlocked. There were 17 missed calls from Nessa, 3 from the Bellwether Police Department. A message from Nessa said, "Bram, answer me." They said he escaped the motel. "Please get Kit and come here." Another message arrived while I was reading. "I love you. Please answer." She loved him. She had never written those words to me with that kind of desperation. I opened Bram's location history. The police station was 9 miles away. I looked at Kit. The boy had backed against the refrigerator. His grandmother's blood was running beneath his shoes. I could not bring him with me. I could not leave him free to call the police. I took him to the basement. He fought when he realized where we were going. He bit my arm. I struck him with the pistol. The first blow opened the skin above his ear. He collapsed on the stairs. For a moment, I thought I had killed him. Then he began sobbing. I dragged him the rest of the way by one ankle. His head struck each step. At the bottom, I tied his wrists to a support pipe. There was food and water nearby. I told him someone would find him. He asked if his father was dead. I said no. He asked about his grandmother. I shut the basement door. I drove Bram's truck to the police station. My face was bruised and covered in dried blood, so I stopped near a public park and washed in the restroom. I changed into a spare paramedic jacket from the truck. The station parking lot was full. I parked behind a church across the road. Through the front windows, I could see Nessa sitting inside. She wore a gray blanket around her shoulders. Detective Keene sat across from her. He had traveled all that distance. They had been working together. The anger I felt then was cleaner than anything I had felt before. It gave me purpose. I waited. Around sunset, Keene left the station with another officer. Nessa remained inside. A female officer brought her coffee. The back of the station connected to a fenced parking area. I circled through an alley and climbed the fence behind a dumpster. A service door stood slightly open. I entered. Nobody challenged the paramedic jacket. I walked along a corridor until I heard Nessa's voice. She was speaking to someone inside a small office. "I should have known he would find us," the female officer replied. "This is not your fault. He always finds me. He won't this time." Nessa began crying. "I left Kit with Bram's mother. What if he goes to the house?" The officer told her units were already on the way. I stepped into the office. Nessa saw me first. The coffee cup fell from her hands. The officer turned. I shot her in the chest. The bullet drove her back into the desk. Nessa screamed. The officer reached for her weapon. I shot her again. The second bullet struck beneath her eye and exited through the back of her skull. A dark splash covered the computer monitor. Alarms erupted inside the building. I grabbed Nessa. She fought harder than anyone I had ever fought. She clawed my face and tried to bite through my thumb. I struck her with the pistol. Her knees buckled. I dragged her through the service corridor while officers shouted from the front. A man appeared at the far end. I fired twice. He fell behind a doorway. We reached the service exit. Nessa's shoes slid through the blood trailing from her scalp. Outside, I pushed her into Bram's truck. She tried to climb out the other side. I caught her ankle and pulled her back. She kicked me in the face. I slammed her head against the doorframe. Once, twice. The third time, her body went loose. I placed her on the floor behind the seats and drove. Police vehicles pursued us within minutes. I took the truck onto an unpaved logging road. The suspension struck every rut hard enough to lift Nessa from the floor. She regained consciousness and began kicking the back of my seat. I told her to stop. She screamed Bram's name. I told her he could not hear her. She became silent. For nearly a minute, the only sounds were the engine and the sirens behind us. Then she asked, "What did you do?" I did not answer. "What did you do to Bram?" "He attacked me." She began making a low sound. "No." "He tried to kill me." "No." I defended myself. "No way." "He stole you." She threw herself against the rear door. It was locked. "What did you do to Kit?" "He is safe." "What did you do?" "He is in the basement." She screamed so loudly my ears rang. I lost control of the truck. We struck a tree on the passenger side. The windshield cracked. The engine continued running. Nessa crawled between the seats and reached for the door. I caught her hair. She twisted and struck me. I pressed the pistol beneath her chin. "Stop." She froze. Blood ran from her scalp and down the side of her face. Her pupils were different sizes. "You killed them," she whispered. "Bram made this happen. You killed them. He knew you belonged to me." "I never belonged to you." I pushed the pistol harder beneath her jaw. She stared into my eyes. Then she said something I still hear whenever it becomes quiet. "I wish you had killed me instead of my baby." I struck her. The pistol fired. The inside of the truck filled with light and sound. For several seconds I could not hear anything. Nessa collapsed across the passenger seat. The bullet had entered beneath her jaw and exited through the side of her face. Her cheek was torn open. Several teeth were embedded in the cracked windshield. Her tongue moved inside the wound. She was still alive. I dropped the pistol. Nessa made a wet, choking sound. Blood poured down her neck and soaked the gray blanket. I pressed my hand over the wound. She tried to push me away. I told her I was sorry. I told her it was an accident. Her fingers found my face. For a moment I thought she was touching me the way she used to. Then she drove her thumb into my eye. I screamed and pulled away. She opened the passenger door and fell onto the road. I climbed after her. Police sirens were getting closer. Nessa crawled through the mud. Blood left a wide trail behind her. I caught her legs. She kicked weakly. I dragged her toward the trees. She grabbed roots and stones. Her fingernails tore backward. One nail came off completely. She kept pulling herself forward. I wrapped my arm around her throat and held her against my chest. She made a bubbling noise through the ruined side of her mouth. "Stop fighting." She continued clawing at my arm. "I'm trying to save you." Her body jerked. I tightened my grip. Blood sprayed from her mouth with each breath. "Please." She would not stop. I held her until she became still. Even then, I continued holding her. The police reached the truck. Flashlights moved through the trees. I left Nessa in the mud and ran. They found her alive. That is what the news says. The bullet destroyed part of her jaw and tongue, but it missed the major arteries. She suffered brain damage from lack of oxygen. They say she may never speak again. They say she communicates by moving 2 fingers. 1 finger means yes. 2 means no. Bram was dead when police reached the house. His mother was dead too. Kit survived. He spent 14 hours tied to the basement pipe beside a drain filled with his own blood and vomit. The strike fractured his skull. The news says he asks for Bram every morning. The female officer I shot died at the station. The other officer survived. There is a nationwide search for me. They call it one of the worst domestic violence cases Bellwether County has ever seen. They have shown photographs of the house. The kitchen wall is still covered with Bram's mother. They showed a blurred image of Nessa being carried from the forest. Her face was wrapped in bandages. Only her eyes were visible. I recognized the way she looked at the camera. Afraid. She always knew how to make people believe her. I am writing this from an empty hunting cabin 80 miles from Bellwether. The owner left food, ammunition, and a radio. I found the cabin after walking for 2 days. My right eye is swollen shut. The scratches on my face are becoming infected. I still have Bram's phone. It receives notifications when connected to the hotspot. Yesterday I accessed the hospital's patient portal using information saved in his password manager. Nessa is being treated at St. Verena Medical Center. Her condition is listed as stable. Detective Keene sits outside her room. Kit visited her yesterday. A hospital employee posted a photograph before deleting it. Kit was seated beside the bed. He held Nessa's hand. Her face was hidden behind dressings and tubes. The caption called her his mother. They are still trying to erase me. Bram is dead, but he is still inside that boy. He is still inside Nessa. I understand now that finding her was not enough. I brought her home in my mind before she was ready. I expected the woman in Bram's house to still be my wife. She was not. He had changed her too much. The woman I married would never have let a child replace our son. The woman I married would never have watched another man put his hands on her. The woman I married would never have looked me in the eye and said she wished I had killed her. That was Livia, not Nessa. Livia belongs to Bram. Nessa is still somewhere inside her. I know how to bring her back. St. Verena has a public entrance and an underground loading area. Paramedics enter through the Eastern Service Corridor. Bram's identification badge is still clipped to the jacket. His photograph looks enough like me if I wear a mask. I found a map of the hospital online. Nessa's room is on the 4th floor. Keene will expect me to run. He thinks I am hiding because I am afraid. I am not afraid. There is a can of gasoline in the shed outside. There are 4 boxes of ammunition. The cabin owner also left a hunting knife with a gut hook. I have cleaned the blood from Bram's phone. I have cleaned the pistol. I have cleaned Nessa's fingernail from the skin beneath my eye. I will enter through the service corridor tomorrow morning during the shift change. I am not going to hurt Nessa. She has already suffered enough. I only need to remove the parts Bram left inside her. Doctors remove infected tissue all the time. Sometimes they cut away healthy flesh too. Sometimes that is the only way to stop the rot from spreading. Afterwards, she will understand. She may not be able to speak, but she will not need to. 1 finger means yes. 2 means no. When I ask whether she remembers me, I know which one she will choose. And if she raises 2 fingers, I will keep removing pieces until she raises one.